Hi, and welcome to Symphonic Destruction Tips and Tutorials. In this episode, we're going to dive deep into the sound design capabilities of the SD Designer and how Symphonic Destruction is an incredible powerhouse that allows composers to craft their own sounds and have a voice of their own by rethinking how we use our source material in combination with the powerful FX and the cycle engine. A lot of today's media scoring revolves around sound design, and to that end, composers need to have creative tools that allows us to write quickly, but also to be able to imprint our own voice into the sounds we write with. And Symphonic Destruction does just that. Today, we're going to take the source material and turn it on its head. We're going to explore how we can use the Braam tails as a source of inspiration for a cue starter. A device that was designed as an effect after a Braam hit will now serve as the tonal foundation for a new track, sparking a myriad of new creative ways of exploring the source material of Symphonic Destruction. All of the sources in Symphonic Destruction can be loaded in any of the 3 channels of the SD Designer engine. And what's especially interesting about loading a Braam tail is that it will stretch the sample across the keyboard, creating really interesting sonorities, particularly on the lower registers of the keyboard. In this case, I'm going to load Pumping Thunder from the first Tails menu, which sounds like this. As you can see, these sounds can open up a whole world of possibilities just by altering the octave in which we play them, and by exploring these we can craft our own versions of the sounds. This particular source sounds pretty good on its own as a cue starter, but one thing to consider about this category of sounds is that they're one-shots. This means that the samples cannot be sustained forever, unlike our sustained categories. For this, we're going to work some magic to craft a sustained source out of these one-shots using the cycle engine. As we have seen on our previous cycle engine video, the cycle plays back the source material in a repeated way, which is what we need to create a sound source that sustains over time. If you need a refresher on that, I will link the cycle page video in the description below. So we're going to engage the cycle engine for the first channel where tail is, then move the start time further into the sound and add some randomization to avoid the much dreaded machine gun effect. Also, we want to smooth out the way it plays back these bits of sample by making the release as long as we're allowed to, and then tweak the attack time so that the playback is as smooth as it can be. Notice how playing with the rate knob creates different textures for our sustained sound. Experiment with all these settings to make your sound source sound the way you need it, or to explore different sonorities that may spark some new ideas. Next up, we're going to use some delay and reverb to mask the transition between cycle playbacks so that it sounds like one smooth continuous source. First up, we're going to use some delay to help sustain our source better. Quarter notes should be a good place to start, and let's add all of the width and the moderate feedback to create a good ambience. Next, we're going to add reverb with size turned all the way up. Use color and damp to fine-tune the color of the effect, and use spread knob to manage the stereo width. Remember to use your ears and your taste to adjust all of the parameters to your liking. Now that we have a sustained source, we can use it for several applications. What we're going to do with it in this case is play it as a drone or low bed, and for that we can use the envelope to shape the attack and release settings so that it eases into the sound and has a bit of a tail when we let go of the keys. Also, for extra fun, we can detune the source by an octave to get a deeper bass sound. Do bear in mind that some of these tails are atonal and have pitch bends, which can create some really interesting results. Here's a few examples of that. To add an extra layer of modulation to our new sound, we can use the Filter tab to create a low-pass filter and modulate its cutoff frequency with a macro control via the mod wheel. We might want to add some resonance to make the modulation more obvious. If you need a refresher on how to modulate the effects via the macro knob, check out the tips and tutorials video on this topic via the link in the description below. We could manually create the modulation controlling mod wheel or CC1, or we can use the macro sequencer and select a random pattern from one of the several available patterns menu to create aleatoric modulation of the cutoff. Let's choose the slowest rate and turn the smooth all the way up to create a natural flow of the macro control. By extending the length of the sequence, we ensure that it won't sound like a pattern that's repeating itself. This is what we get. Now, to finalize the sound, we can use the master effects. Adding some punish will compress and add warmth to the sound. But there's a little trick that I like to use when creating sounds with the SD Designer, and it's in the distortion tab. By using the amp type and setting the drive almost to 0, I can use the tone knob to control the tone of the overall sound by adding very little distortion while effectively scooping out some of the mid-range that usually builds up when you're detuning material and adding delays and reverbs. Now that we have our source sound ready to go, we can work with the second and third channel to create a tonal sting to play over our new soundscape by setting up another tail source and giving it a similar treatment to what we just did. For this, I have already loaded the same sound source called the Meltdown, but panned left and right and detuned 1 octave. The envelope is also set with a really slow attack and a very long release, so that every note I play rings out for a little while. But the start time of each channel is set differently, so that every time we play a note, each channel will trigger the source from a different position in the sample. This avoids cancelling out the effect of panning sources left and right. Also, I reduced the width to 1/4 to maximize left and right separation, and I added reverb in both channels and a delay with different settings and a narrow width again for separation. This is what this sounds like. Now that we have all of our sounds crafted, I will show you again the first sound we started with and then compare it with the final product of applying all this sound design process. For extra playability, I split the keyboard in the options page. I linked channels 2 and 3 to work as one and limited the range for each source so that they won't overlap. Well, here we are. A cue starter using just the tails from the Braam designer, using the powerful SD Designer engine to create our own soundscapes and a little bit of damage too for some rhythmic support. This is just a taste of what you can do with just one category of the sound sources included in Symphonic Destruction. I encourage you to spend time crafting your own unique sounds, exploring all of the source material and the effects included in the engine. If you found the content of this video useful, please give it a like and share. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the comments below, or let us know what part of Symphonic Destruction you'd like to see featured in these videos. Also, make sure to subscribe to our channel and stay tuned to future content and releases. Thanks for watching and see you next time.